joining me today. We're going to work on a couple of different techniques through the course of this CD and DVD, and I'd really like you just to join me in my little stamping area and let's see what we can create together. For today, we're going to do a card that is what we call stained glass on acetate using tissue. So as you can see on this one, we've used a little bit of thread and there's a background to it, and we've stamped on acetate. So we're going to use a card and a different image for this particular one that we're doing today, but this is generally the finished product that we're going to go for. So for starting off today, we need a piece of acetate. Now, you can use the piece off a shirt box if you like to. Sorry about the noise, we're just getting some acetate out. You can buy acetate in rolls as well. I've got some pre-cut acetate here just for ease of being able to do the demo. Little piece of white paper underneath just so that you can catch everything that you need to catch. We're going to use a StazOn ink pad, which is a solvent ink pad. Solvent inks just mean that they won't run no matter what you colour them with, but they are also quite slippery. Acetate to stamp on is very slippery anyway, so we do need to take quite a bit of care when we actually stamp onto the acetate. So once again, as we've gone through at the beginning of the DVD and the correct technique for inking up a stamp, grab your stamp, just firmly stamping it across your pad. You want a really, really even coverage for this particular kind of stamping. Important to try and get that anyway, but obviously with your acetate you can't go back and correct it. What you get is what you get, so it really does need to be inked up correctly. I cover my stamp pads as I go along. Personal preference, entirely up to you. Again, holding your stamp firmly, choose where you want to place it on your acetate, put it straight down very, very carefully, put one finger in the centre to hold it firm, and then just press firmly. Very hard to smile when I'm doing this. And then holding your acetate so it doesn't move, lift your stamp straight up and off. And there you go. You can see that we've got our stamped image on the acetate. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside to dry now. Because we've used a solvent ink, it will dry reasonably quickly, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I tend to leave mine overnight just so that I can be sure that they're completely dry. Don't want it to smudge while we're doing the next person. Now, while we're waiting for that to dry, I've got a piece of tissue, just regular tissue paper from your newsagents or your supermarket. I'm going to stamp on the non-shiny side. Doesn't, again, make a lot of difference, personal preference. So I'm going to stamp on the non-shiny side. I've got 4 VersaColor ink pads here, as you can see. You can use large ink pads, small ink pads. Doesn't actually matter what ink pad you use. If you do use a pigment ink pad, you do need a little, give it a drying time. Starting with the lightest colour, so my silver, I'm just going to just dab all over the piece that I'm working on to cover it. Now, once I've done this, I'm not going to be able to use it immediately because I do need to make sure that it is completely dry. We are not embossing it, therefore it's a little bit more important again. Now, once we've put one colour on, making sure that you try and fold your colour to the inside, we're just literally going to scrunch that up into a big ball, small ball, because you can work on a bigger piece if you want to, and then just very, very carefully open that up, smooth it out, and go back down onto your card. Now we're going to apply the second colour to that. So now what we're applying is a bit of yellow. Now if you want to, you can actually press quite firmly. Just move your hand around to try and keep from tearing the tissue. Once you've torn the tissue, it's actually quite difficult to do what you want. If you press a little bit firmer, as you can see that I'm doing here, we get a little bit stronger colour. Really, again, it all is about preference when you're stamping. There's a correct way for doing certain things. Other things, it really comes down to what sort of a result you want to be in. Again, I'm going to close that up. I'm going to scrunch it up. What it does is it gives us a little bit of a cracked glass look at the end, but it also means that the colours, by scrunching it, we're actually going to get those colours to blend a little bit and not have quite so many sharp edges. Now, as we get more and more colour and the piece of tissue gets wetter, what actually happens is if you're not careful, you do start to get tears, so be very, very gentle with that. The next colour I'm going to put on is the magenta. So again, with this one, I just want a little bit of a sort of more overall cover, so I'm just gently tapping that and pulling at the same time. I don't want the magenta to be my heavy colour, so that's just going to go on fairly lightly like that. And then once I'm satisfied with that, before I scrunch this one, I'm going to add the blue to it. Now, I do want the blue to be reasonably heavy, and I actually want quite strong geometric shapes there from the blue pad. So as you can see, I'm getting the corners from that now. They will soften off when we scrunch it up. And that's about all I want on that particular one. So that's all there is to our inking up. Roll it around in a ball. And just very, very gently now, because it's quite wet, we're going to open this up and you'll see the result that we have now. It has already not torn, but you can actually see little pinholes in it, and I don't want that to get any worse, so I'm just going to very, very gently smooth it out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that one aside. We've got one that we've already got ready to go that's been dried, that we've pre-done. I just wanted to show you that technique. And you can do, when I do these, I do about 6 or 7 at a time, and I actually literally put them away until I'm ready to do what I want to do with them, and then I've got them ready to go. So I'm just going to set that one aside. And this is the one that I did this one about a week and a half ago, and this is the correct side. It's all dry and ready to go. Now I'll just check and see if that piece of acetate is actually dry, and it's dry. Now we're going to use the reverse side of the side that we've stamped on, so we're going to turn the acetate over. Now this part isn't hard to do, it's just a little tricky, and you just need to almost do it with no interruptions. What I'm going to do, I use diamond glaze for this. It's put out by Judikins. There's a number of other items. You can try spray adhesive. I've never found it terribly successful in that. I just don't feel that it sticks well enough, and oftentimes you'll have the tissue coming off afterwards, and we don't want that. So find something that you're happy with and use. It just needs to be a very, very strong glue. I'm just going to very carefully put a little bit on the back of the acetate. As you can see, I'm using a skewer to keep it closed, and I'm just using my finger. You can use a brush. I worry about brushes. Hairs tend to come out from them, at least with your finger. You know your finger's clean. And so what I need to do is just spread that out all over the back of the acetate really, really evenly. Now I need to make sure, I don't have to go right to the edges, but I do need to make sure that it is completely covered with glue, the entire area that I want to be able to apply to a card afterwards, because that we're going to trim around the edges once it's all completely dry with the tissue on the back, but that's where we're going to stop. And just wiping my finger on a paper towel over the side, pick up that piece of acetate carefully, have a good look at it, make sure you've got the glue on all the areas that you need to have it on. I think I need a little bit more in the middle, so I'm just going to pop a little bit more in there, and you will squeeze it out the edges, so if you have a little bit too much on, it's not a problem. So I'm just putting a little bit more in the center just to make sure that it's all covered on over. So picking up that piece of acetate now, just very, very carefully move my tissue over to the center, take my piece of acetate and just position it onto the tissue and press it down firmly. Now what I'm actually going to do is press this very carefully all the way through. I want every piece of that tissue underneath the glue to actually stick, and we need to press it firmly because of the wrinkling in the tissue. It's very, very easy to get little dry spaces and air bubbles, so if we can get rid of those, it will have a nicer result at the end. So now that's on there, I'm just going to rub it, and there you go, it's ready to put away and dry. Now it will have, as you can see, and I'm not going to say that that doesn't happen, you do need to be very careful when you're taking it off. That's caught there because it got very wet. You can turn it over and rub if you want to, but just very, very carefully peeling it off. Now that's fine, just like that, because when I'm finished, I'm actually going to cut out and we're going to use just this area of the image there. So as you can see, pretty important just to ensure that it's all fairly well stuck down. So I'm going to pop that aside, and upside down obviously so the glue doesn't stick. We're going to pop that aside and allow it to dry. Okay, got a fresh piece of white paper now, and we're going to work with an image that I've already glued and pasted onto the tissue that I'd worked with earlier, which I had actually prepared about a week ago. So